365 Days with Self-Discipline, 365 Life-Altering Thoughts on Self-Control, Mental Resilience, and Success by Martin Meadows. Prologue. Uzuk woke up with the first rays of sunlight hitting his face. He scanned the interior of his dusty hut, constructed with twigs, mud, and dry grass. He scratched his back, which, as always, had been bitten by insects over and over again throughout the night. Grateful that the night had passed without any danger to his family, he crawled out, careful not to make any sounds. It was a crisp and clear morning. He would have loved to take his family for a walk around the waterfall and play with his little son, but there was work to do. It had been 5 days since the tribe ate something more substantial than a fistful of berries. Unfazed by the bloodthirsty mosquitoes buzzing by, Uzuk walked over to the fire pit and warmed his calloused hands. The light scent of wood smoke filled his nostrils. He rubbed his hands together, still feeling the painful absence of his index finger lost during that fateful hunt many moons ago. One by one, his fellow tribesmen crawled out of their huts and joined him. At the fire, there was Dizgab, his friend who was bitten by a snake and was left partly paralyzed on his left side. Nok limped along next, with his broken foot badly healed, and a part of his skull partly caved in after a stone thrown by an enemy tribesman hit him smack dab in the middle of his forehead. Reknad sauntered into the group next. So far, he was the luckiest of the band, with only a deep scar on his cheek, left from an attack by a tiger that had massacred a half of the tribe. Other men, some missing limbs, some having lost their entire families, some with even more horrible memories, joined the group. When the men were ready, they separated into 2 groups and ventured out to secure food for the tribe. They made it back to the camp in the early afternoon, forced to make a hasty retreat after spotting a leopard resting in the thick bushes. Yet again, they had failed to obtain food, but at least they were grateful that, unlike 2 moons ago, this time nobody had been hurt. With empty stomachs, the adults gathered around the fire pit while small children, supervised by teenagers armed with spears and bows, played by the creek a short distance from the camp. They reluctantly decided that the area could no longer support them. While clean water was plentiful and predators rare, food was becoming increasingly scarce and successful hunts were few and far between. The next day they would gather their belongings, put them on their backs, and walk for a long time until they would find another suitable place for a new, temporary dwelling. Some would die along the way, some would get hurt, but such was life, Uzuk thought to himself. A human being couldn't ever stop struggling and fighting to survive each day. I can hear you thinking, what a weird prologue to a book about self-discipline. Bear with me, please. Our basic human nature hasn't changed since the days of Uzuk. While the vast majority of humans fortunately no longer have to live in constant discomfort and fear of death, we would still do well to possess even a fraction of mental toughness and self-discipline our ancestors had. In the modern world, it's easy to live without even a modicum of self-discipline. Back then, nobody could avoid discomfort. It was a fact of life that one couldn't thrive unless they ventured into the world, facing unknown risks and possible death in a quest for a better life. Today, most people are unable to wake up early without an alarm clock, and even then, it takes them 30 minutes just to crawl out of bed. Most would find it impossible to sleep on the bare floor, with insects crawling over them and biting their bodies the entire night. If they experienced just a slight ache, most would skip work and complain about how much pain they were in. Most wouldn't be able to fast for an entire day, let alone go without food for 5 days in a row. Compared to our ancestors, we have it easy, yet, or perhaps because of it, so many people struggle with self-discipline today. A great majority of them do nothing to fix that, and the ones who try are often met with ridicule. If you belong to the group that is trying to better themselves or wanting to do so, the book you're now reading is for you. I wrote 365 Days with Self-Discipline with the intention of creating a daily companion to help you embrace self-discipline in your everyday life. As the author of several best-selling books about self-discipline and being a personal growth junkie myself, self-control is a topic close to my heart. I believe that if a person wants to reach their full potential, he or she can't avoid discomfort. Doing things that might not be entirely pleasant is key to achieving long-term objectives. In the following pages, I'll share with you one thought for each day of a year that is devoted to the topic of self-discipline, mental toughness, success, or self-improvement in general. The thoughts come from some of the world's brightest minds, successful entrepreneurs, athletes, best-selling authors, researchers, performers, bloggers, and more. Since the entries are brief and get straight to the heart of the matter, you'll be able to quickly find ongoing inspiration to continue working on your most important long-term goals and on becoming an ever better person. Due to the large number of days in a year, some themes will inevitably repeat, but I strove to address each subtopic from different perspectives. Please note that I have quoted various people from numerous sources, including books, articles, blogs, speeches, interviews, and more. By citing their words, I don't necessarily endorse their works or their persona. A note on quotes in the physical and ebook version of the book: whenever I could, I cited the source and included an endnote. Unfortunately, the exact source of a small number of quotes, particularly those by historic figures, was elusive to me. Whenever I couldn't find the author, as is often the case with many inspirational quotes circulating around the internet, instead of risking misattribution I wrote unknown. Let's turn the page and start with day 1 and the most important thought that defines the difference between a self-disciplined person and a weak-willed one. Week 1. Day 1, on living the hard way. Life's easy when you live it the hard way, and hard if you try to live it the easy way. Self-discipline means living your life the hard way, resisting temptations and instant gratification, in order to receive bigger and better rewards in the future. It's certainly easier to avoid all kinds of discomfort and indulge yourself whenever you want, but in the end, all that you get from that approach is fleeting pleasure now at the expense of your future, which otherwise could have been much better. Consider a weak-willed person who, when faced with a challenge, immediately opts out. How likely is this person to achieve anything substantial in life if their primary value is to feel comfortable? How is this person going to manage a crisis that they must face? Even a relatively insignificant problem can become an insurmountable obstacle for a person who's been living a sheltered life and always avoided what's difficult or disagreeable. Now contrast that with a person who voluntarily makes his or her life harder. They seek out and welcome challenges as opportunities to grow. Each self-imposed affliction strengthens them, so that fewer and fewer difficulties in life overwhelm them. Day by day, they immunize themselves against problems, precisely because they seek them out. When life deals them an unexpected blow, they're ready to handle it because, thanks to living their lives the hard way, they're always ready for hardships. Day 2, on your choices. Your choices are made in a moment, but their consequences will transcend a lifetime. Eat this greasy, high-calorie hamburger or prepare a healthy salad. Sleep in and barely get to work on time, or wake up at 5 a.m. to work on your side business before going to work at your day job. Stop trying the moment you get rejected, or swallow your pride and keep going, despite hearing no dozens of times. It takes only a moment to make the wrong choice and jeopardize your future. What feels like an insignificant decision today can have a great, lasting impact on your future. Each choice sets a precedent, and when you make the same wrong choice several times in a row, it becomes your standard modus operandi. While one hamburger every now and then isn't likely to ruin your overall efforts to lose weight, underestimating the impact of repeatedly making the wrong choice can profoundly affect you over the course of the rest of your life. Each time you're faced with a decision between exerting self-discipline and taking it easy, remind yourself that the choice you're making today doesn't affect the present moment alone. A momentary decision can, and often will, reverberate for many years or even decades into the future. Day 3, on being a human. Willpower is what separates us from the animals. It's the capacity to restrain our impulses, resist temptation, do what's right and good for us in the long run, not what we want to do right now. It's central, in fact, to civilization. Humans have the capacity to act against their urges in exchange for a better future. Unfortunately, many people live by the principle of, if it feels good, do it, and if it doesn't, don't do it. Caving into your temptations whenever you feel them emerge is like relinquishing your humanity, in a way. As an intelligent human being, you have an ability, and I dare say an obligation, to make decisions that are based on rational thinking, not on your instincts alone. Strive to be a better human and embrace your humanity by exercising your willpower muscle, instead of succumbing to your most primal, and least helpful for your long-term goals, part of the brain. Your most primal instincts may provide temporary comfort, but seldom are good for the long term, except when there is a direct threat to your survival. Day 4, on creating systems. I value self-discipline, but creating systems that make it next to impossible to misbehave is more reliable than self-control. A lot of people think that being self-disciplined means that you can sit in front of a delicious piece of cake and stare at it for hours without eating it. They think of resisting temptations as being like a knight defending his kingdom against the invader. If you go to seedy bars every week, your chances of getting punched in the face are higher than those of a person spending their evenings at home with a book. Likewise, the best way to protect yourself against temptations is to avoid them, and for that, plain old preparation is more valuable than self-control. Your chances of cheating on a diet are higher if you have forbidden foods at home. Removing them from your house, a simple act that requires little willpower, as long as you're satiated while doing so, will protect you when you get hungry and the urge to gorge on them hits you like a ton of bricks. Your chances of sleeping in are lower if you set 3 different alarms and place them away from your bed. You'll be less likely to waste time at work when you block the most distracting websites instead of relying on your willpower to stop you before loading those funny cat pictures. Prepare yourself for difficult situations by putting up roadblocks ahead of time, when your resolve isn't being tested. Your self-control system will do some of the heavy lifting for you, leaving your reserves of self-discipline to be used for the unplanned situations, when they arise. Day 5, on enslavement to self. Before complaining that you are a slave to another, be sure that you are not a slave to self. Look within, you will find there, perchance, slavish thoughts, slavish desires, and in your daily life and conduct slavish habits. Conquer these, cease to be a slave to self, and no man will have the power to enslave you. It's easy to delegate the responsibility for our lives and choices to other people. It's not your fault that you can't stick to a diet, it's because your friends constantly tempt you to grab something to eat with them. It's not your fault that you can't control your finances, it's those evil corporations that spend millions on advertising and leave you powerless to change. It's not that you lack willpower to exercise, people always want something from you and you never have the time to develop this healthy habit. In reality, nothing could be further from the truth. While external circumstances can affect you, in the end, whether or not they control your life depends on you. Just like James Allen said, when you achieve self-mastery, no one, and no thing, will have the power to enslave you. The next time you blame an external factor for your lack of self-discipline, think again. Was it the person eating chocolate next to you who controlled what you put in your mouth, or was it you? Day 6, on superhumans. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact: everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you, and you can change it, you can influence it, you can build your own things that other people can use. Despite an enormous selection of movies about superhumans, they don't really exist. I know, it's shocking news, right? Nobody, including the world's biggest geniuses, was, is, or ever will be a superhuman, infinitely better in all aspects than the average mortal. It's easy to forget this fact when you look at the accomplishments of the people who are changing the world around you. After all, they appear to be so perfect, extremely productive, intelligent, beautiful, creative, persistent, strong, and the list goes on. Behind the scenes, everyone struggles in some areas of their lives. I'm an author of several books about self-discipline, but it doesn't mean that I never struggle with self-control. I deal with the same problems as every other person, and the only difference is that I've discovered how to handle some of them a bit more effectively. I've had my fair share of failures, found myself unable to resist some temptations, and I jeopardized some long-term goals because I succumbed to the allure of instant gratification. This is the human condition. People whom you consider to be extremely successful aren't that different from you. Many of them in the past had less willpower than you exhibit now, and many of them might be more disciplined than you in one aspect, but less disciplined in another. Becoming a self-disciplined person is within everybody's grasp. You don't need to have won the genetic lottery or get introduced to a country club to develop self-control, and neither you nor anybody else will ever achieve permanent, flawless self-mastery over every aspect of life. Accept that and accept yourself, as well. Day 7, on poverty and self-discipline. A second line of research has shown that economic stress robs us of cognitive bandwidth. Worrying about bills, food or other problems, leaves less capacity to think ahead or to exert self-discipline. So, poverty imposes a mental tax. Financial stress, or for that matter, all kinds of stress, diminishes your ability to delay gratification. Consequently, poor people find it harder to resist temptations. In the end, they get stuck in a vicious cycle. They can't escape poverty because it imposes constant mental stress on them, which then leads them to making bad decisions, not only the financial ones, but also those relating to their health, relationships, and general future. Does it mean that if you're struggling financially, you're destined to have a bad life? Not necessarily. Taking personal responsibility and becoming conscious of the source of the problem can help you push ahead and overcome your circumstances. Launching one of my businesses put me in debt. It exerted immense daily stress on me. No matter what I was doing, there was always the thought in the back of my head that I had a debt to repay. In some months, I was so close to not meeting my obligations on time that I would have been forced to close up shop if it weren't for some money I managed to make at the last minute. This experience has made me realize that no matter what they say about money not bringing happiness, at least several months' worth of income kept as savings in the bank means the difference between a relatively stress-free life and the soul-crushing fear when you can't cover an urgent, important expense. If you're struggling with finances, make it one of your priorities to get out of debt as quickly as you can and build an emergency fund covering at least 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses. In addition to improving your financial health, it will dramatically reduce stress and strengthen your ability to delay gratification and make more optimal choices favoring your future. Week 2. Day 8, on unessential necessities. Epicurus wanted to examine the things he thought he needed so he could determine which of them he could in fact live without. He realized that in many cases, we work hard to obtain something because we are convinced that we would be miserable without it. The problem is that we can live perfectly well without some of these things, but we won't know which they are if we don't try living without them. Ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus would have his hands full in modern times if he wanted to spread his philosophy. We live in the world in which you feel you deserve to have luxuries. In fact, they're no longer considered luxuries but necessities because most people mistakenly think they can't live without them. The problem with mistaking luxuries for necessities is that it's impossible to develop powerful self-discipline if you need a lot just to function. How is a person who believes that they need to eat empty calories in the form of burgers, pizzas, or white bread supposed to lose weight? How likely is that an individual who thinks that it's necessary to lease a new car every 2 years will exert enough self-discipline to save money and deprive himself or herself of what they consider a basic human need? Periodically try living without something that you consider a necessity. You'll benefit in several ways. First, you'll voluntarily put yourself in an uncomfortable situation that will help you expand your comfort zone and develop your mental resilience. Second, you'll discover whether you really need this thing in your life, and if you find you don't, it will provide food for thought as to how many other things in your life are in fact not as important as you thought they were. This can then help you eliminate the unessential from your life and free up additional resources to focus on what's important. Finally, you will increase your ability to feel happy with less, including being happy in a situation when you're deprived of something involuntarily. Day 9, on your future self. In 4 studies, participants interacted with realistic computer renderings of their future selves using immersive virtual reality hardware and interactive decision aids. In all cases, those who interacted with virtual future selves exhibited an increased tendency to accept later monetary rewards over immediate ones. Studies suggest that people who are aided with technology to imagine their future selves are more likely to delay gratification. In the case of the cited study, they're more likely to save money for retirement. This shows that your self-discipline is largely affected by your ability to feel empathy toward your future self. If the vision of you 10, 20, or 30 years from now isn't particularly vivid, you'll have a hard time denying yourself pleasure today so that the stranger in the future can benefit. For this reason, consider occasionally meditating on your future self. Ask yourself if today you're grateful for the choices you made several years ago, or if you wish that in the past you had been more concerned about your future. Are the choices you're making today choices that are only benefiting the present you, but don't contribute to, or worse, jeopardize, your well-being in the future? The person you'll become in 10 years will most likely not be the same person you are today, but it will still be you, and it's in your hands whether, 10 years from now you'll look back and feel glad you extended self-empathy well into the future, or find that you decided to be selfish and steal from your future for some fleeting pleasure today. Day 10, on building your story. Words create sentences, sentences create paragraphs, sometimes paragraphs quicken and begin to breathe. Writing a novel is a daunting task if you've never written one before. It's hard to write even a single paragraph, let alone write 200 or 300 pages that will capture the attention of the reader and keep them reading until the last page. What's worse, after all this effort, you'll probably realize that your novel, when compared to a widely acclaimed best-selling novel, is only good for kindling. What you fail to see is that the author of that best-selling novel most likely has spent a decade or more mastering their craft. They started with words, which then became sentences, paragraphs, and eventually stories. Their first attempts, like those of everybody else, were unsuccessful. It took them hundreds of thousands of words worth of practice to finally write a masterpiece. Building self-discipline is similar to writing a novel. You might consider a disciplined person who always wakes up at 4 in the morning, is physically active every day, eats a healthy diet, is super productive, and is capable of balancing it all with their social life and family obligations as a superhuman. But in reality, this person, like the best-selling novelist, probably started with one simple change and kept building on top of it. Whenever you get discouraged, or feel tired by how far you still have to go to accomplish your goals, remind yourself that everybody who has built self-discipline had to go through the same process, starting with little changes which then turned into habits, which then led to big lifestyle changes and identity shifts, and eventually, into successes. Day 11, on self-discipline and talent. Self-discipline without talent can often achieve astounding results, whereas talent without self-discipline inevitably dooms itself to failure. When you look at some of the most successful high performers, it might be tempting to say that they were born this way. They're talented, end of story. In fact, talent, while undeniably makes life easier, is but one part of the equation. I used to be a shy and fearful person. If you compared me, the awkward outsider, with the most successful guys at school, you could say they were born talented to be popular, liked and as alpha male as you could get, while I didn't have such luck. However, my apparent misfortune turned out to be a source of strength because it provided a spark to introduce big changes in my life. By continuously pushing my comfort zone, I not only overcame social shyness and improved my communication skills, but also developed high self-confidence and overcame other fears in my life. I might not have been born with the talent to be a people person, I still prefer solitude to crowds, but with self-discipline and consistent work, I still achieved astounding results. Next time, before you complain that you don't have a talent for something or weren't born this way, remind yourself that self-discipline, in many situations, can more than make up for a lack of inborn traits. Day 12, on calmness of mind. Calmness of mind is one of the beautiful jewels of wisdom. It is the result of long and patient effort in self-control. Its presence is an indication of ripened experience, and of a more than ordinary knowledge of the laws and operations of thought. If I asked you to show me a symbol of self-discipline, you might think of a Buddhist monk, capable of sitting still for hours on end with an empty mind and only a hint of a smile on his face, content simply to be. Such self-control feels like a superpower in today's busy and fast-moving world, in which distractions lurk at every corner and buzz in every pocket. A person who's capable of maintaining calmness of mind is a rare individual, but fortunately you can also become one, if you're only willing to put in some effort. Implementing some kind of a meditative practice in your weekly schedule will not only help you increase your self-control and develop more patience, but also reduce your stress and make you feel happier. The most common practice to learn how to calm your mind is to meditate. However, meditation isn't the only habit that puts you in a meditative state. The key to developing everyday calmness is focusing your attention on the present moment or on a single activity that you're performing. Engaging in a high-focus sport like yoga, rock climbing, or boxing can be a good way to tap into this state, and so can be something as mundane as gardening, dancing, or knitting. The more often you put yourself in a meditative state, the calmer you'll become in everyday situations. Cultivating calmness will lead to even more self-control, and that will lead to an ever-heightening ability to control your state of mind and prevent emotions from clouding your judgment. Day 13, on what you want now and what you want most. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. If you're on a diet and decide to eat a piece of chocolate, you're deciding that the instant fleeting pleasure is worth it more than your long-term goals. Obviously, one piece of chocolate doesn't immediately translate to gaining weight, but it sets a precedent that, over the long term, does change your body, in such a way that it reflects your preference for what you want now, not what you want most. Each time you make a choice that favors instant gratification, your behavior signals that you have weak motivators. If your reasons why were strong enough, you'd be less likely to go with what you want now. Imagine a straight line. On one end, there's the satisfaction you get from what you want now, and on the other end, there's the satisfaction you'll get from what you want most. If the two ends are close to each other, meaning you only want what you want most a little bit more than what you want now, you'll have a problem delaying gratification. If, on the other hand, the thing you want most is so much more rewarding than what you want now, you'll have an easier time resisting the temptation. To achieve your long-term goals, make sure that the satisfaction you get from what you want most is always much stronger than the satisfaction you can get from what you want now. Day 14, on long-term focus. In order to succeed, you must have a long-term focus. Most of the challenges in our lives come from a short-term focus. I spent several long years starting one business after another, deluding myself that it was possible to build a six-figure business in a few months. Each time I failed to reach this goal, I closed one business and started working on another. Sometimes I worked on 2 or 3 ideas at the same time, thinking that one of them would surely succeed. I would have saved myself a lot of time if I had realized that I had a short-term focus, and this attitude had been the very reason why I couldn't accomplish my goals. The moment I switched my mindset to that of being in it for the long haul, things started falling into place. When I look back at my other goals, I struggled in a similar way due to the same reason. In fitness, I wanted to build a well-defined physique as quickly as possible. I frequently reduced my daily caloric intake to levels that were impossible to maintain over the long term. In the end, I would have accomplished my goals more quickly by taking a more sustainable approach that would take me a year or 2 to reach my goal than fooling myself I could reach it in 2 or 3 months. In learning languages, I wanted to learn new words as quickly as possible and soon found myself discouraged from looking at even one more word. I wanted to learn a few dozen words a day, but in the end I would have accomplished more with a routine of learning just 5 to 10 words a day, but maintained and used over years, not just weeks or months. Analyze your goals and how you approach them. Replace short-term oriented behaviors with those that show that you're in it for the long haul. Self-discipline isn't limited to rejecting a cake or sticking to an exercise habit. You also need self-discipline to maintain a long-term focus in all of your endeavors. Week 3. Day 15, on constant improvement. Knowledge has to be improved, challenged, and increased constantly, or it vanishes. Just like knowledge, you can't take self-discipline for granted. Unfortunately, being a self-disciplined person isn't a one-and-done kind of thing. Once you have learned how to live that way, you can still lose it if you don't consistently strengthen it by setting new challenges and rejecting instant gratification in favor of bigger future rewards. Never assume that you're disciplined enough. There's always a new area in which you can improve your self-control and further expand your comfort zone. For example, regular exercise poses no challenge for my self-discipline. In order to strengthen it, I need to set bigger and bigger exercise-related challenges for myself. Instead of focusing on fitness, I can also find a new area in which my discipline is lacking, such as developing more patience when dealing with other people, and focus on improving it until it's no longer a test for my resolve. Such consistent practice ensures that you're at least maintaining your level of self-control, and ideally always getting better at it. Day 16, on self-reliance. A man then must stand erect, not be kept erect by others. There's no doubt that surrounding yourself with people who support your goals is helpful. It's easier to exercise with a friend, diet along with your spouse, or belong to a community of frugal people. However, as Marcus Aurelius says, you need to beware of relying too much on others. Recovering from an injury isn't fully recovered if they can't stand without a crutch. You aren't self-disciplined enough unless you can still stick to your resolutions even without the help of other people. Day 17, on rising from the ashes of failure. A setback has often cleared the way for greater prosperity. Many things have fallen only to rise to more exalted heights. No matter how self-disciplined you are, there's no escaping the fact that sometimes you'll stumble. Perhaps you'll eat a piece of a cake instead of a salad. Maybe you'll skip a workout out of laziness. It's possible that when your efforts result in a failure, you'll lose the self-discipline to continue and revert back to your old undesirable habits. It's all par for the course, and the sooner you accept it, the easier it will be to handle the setbacks once they occur. However, don't consider your failures a useless waste of time and energy. A failure can often present new opportunities, or lead to important realizations. I failed to learn how to play tennis despite putting considerable amount of time, energy, and money into it. However, this made me realize that I wanted to concentrate on rock climbing, and the failure with tennis cleared the way for dramatic improvements in my climbing performance. When discouraged, remember that all struggles present opportunities that, given enough time, you can convert into successes or lessons that will aid you in other areas of life. Day 18, on higher standards. Hold yourself responsible for a higher standard than anybody else expects of you. Never excuse yourself. Never pity yourself. Be a hard master to yourself, and be lenient to everybody else. The only standards that should concern you are your own standards. If you act in accordance with the standards of the majority of people, you'll be overweight, unfit, unhealthy, lazy, hating your job, not having enough time for your family, and in debt. I sometimes get flack for my goals. You're already slim. Why do you still watch your diet? Why do you save so much money? You should live it up. Can't you live like a normal person, instead of waking up at 5 a.m. and going to sleep as early as 8 p.m.? By the standards of the person criticizing me, I should have stopped improving myself a long time ago. According to my standards, the growth should never end. I always hold myself responsible for a higher standard, and this allows me to maintain success-friendly habits in my life and achieve even more success. If you allow yourself to have low standards, how are you supposed to ever achieve excellence? Exhibiting self-control is one of the most powerful demonstrations of having high standards. Letting fleeting emotions and urges control your life, as most people do, is a surefire path to mediocrity. Day 19, on fighting well. The important thing in the Olympic Games is not to win, but to take part. The important thing in life is not triumph, but the struggle. The essential thing is not to have conquered, but to have fought well. Nobody will ever give you any grades for your level of self-discipline. There's no finish line and there's no podium for the winners. The only purpose of building self-discipline is to conquer yourself, your own urges, your own weaknesses, and your own self-sabotaging behaviors. It's easy to forget this fact and assume that when you reach your goals you're done. In fact, the moment you make your dreams come true isn't the most important moment. It's important, no doubt, but without the process leading to it, in itself it means little. The most important moments are the moments of struggle, when you're striving to fight even when you can barely stand and the whole world is spinning around you. It's this very act that proves your mettle and showers you with life-encompassing benefits, not the act of winning in itself. Whenever you find yourself frustrated that you're still a long way from the finish line, remember that it's right now, at this very moment, that you're collecting the biggest rewards. It's the struggle in itself that improves you and makes you a more successful person. Day 20, on taking small steps. We should discipline ourselves in small things, and from there progress to things of greater value. If you have a headache, practice not cursing. Don't curse every time you have an earache. And I'm not saying that you can't complain, only don't complain with your whole being. Rome wasn't built in a day, and you won't build self-discipline overnight. If you've never been particularly disciplined, start small with easy challenges, and then build on top of them. Epictetus suggests a simple exercise of not complaining when you feel unwell. To make the first step even easier, he says that you don't even have to immediately stop complaining at all, just stop complaining with your whole being. Could you do it just for today? Once you successfully go one day without complaining with your whole being, how about 2 days? 3 days? A week? A month? Could you then add other little challenges and consistently strengthen your willpower? Other simple practices you can implement to begin building more self-discipline include resisting the temptation to yell in anger when another driver does something that irks you, eating just slightly less than you'd like to eat, like 1 square of a chocolate or 1 potato chip less. Working for just 1 minute longer when you're ready to call it a day. Work on several such little challenges and soon you'll gain more self-control and be able to progress to bigger changes. Day 21, on the importance of habits. Success is actually a short race, a sprint fueled by discipline just long enough for habit to kick in and take over. Habits are like magical powers. The moment they kick in, you no longer need more than perhaps a modicum of self-discipline every now and then to continue performing the same action on a regular basis. What originally was extremely difficult to do is now something you largely do automatically, with little thought or willpower. When something becomes a part of your routine, resistance drops to nearly zero. The challenging part is forming a new habit. Research suggests that it takes anywhere from 18 to 254 days to form a new habit, with 66 days being the average time, not 21 days, as the common knowledge goes. When working on your goals, remind yourself that it's the first months that will be the hardest. Once the proper habits kick in, things will get easier. Remember that in the long term, only habits, and their subsequent permanent changes in lifestyle and identity, can ensure lasting success. Consequently, it's key to think in terms of lifelong routines. As long as you're jumping from one 2-week diet to another instead of establishing new nutritional habits, you're destined to regain weight. As long as you're switching between different 6-week workout programs to lose some weight, and not thinking of exercise as a permanent part of your weekly routine, sooner or later, you'll revert to inactivity. Analyze your goals and assess whether your plans employ self-discipline to help you build a habit or if you're using self-control as a means of temporarily sustaining an impermanent change. Week 4. Day 22, on self-discipline as freedom. Self-discipline is a form of freedom. Freedom from laziness and lethargy, freedom from the expectations and demands of others, freedom from weakness and fear or doubt. Self-discipline allows a pitcher to feel his individuality, his inner strength, his talent. He is master of, rather than a slave to, his thoughts and emotions. Changing the way you think about self-discipline can help you become more self-disciplined. If you think about it in terms of deprivation and suffering, guess what? You'll never find enjoyment in personal growth, and most likely will soon give up on your endeavors. On the other hand, a person who thinks of self-discipline as a form of freedom will welcome opportunities to practice his or her self-control. When facing temptations and fighting hard to not let them enslave you, remember that through letting go of them, you aren't losing anything substantial. The freedom to be a master of your thoughts and emotions is ultimately worth more than any temporary gratification, of which you're depriving yourself. Day 23, on disciplined education. To read a newspaper is to refrain from reading something worthwhile. The natural laziness of the mind tempts one to eschew authors who demand a continuous effort of intelligence. The first discipline of education must therefore be to refuse resolutely to feed the mind with canned chatter. The way you get information can affect your self-discipline. By getting your news from just one source and blindly believing it, you run the risk of mental laziness. After all, why think about what the provided news really means or whether it's even true in the first place? It's the job of the newspaper or news site, isn't it? Take advantage of the opportunity to improve your self-discipline by exposing yourself to other points of view and thinking for yourself. It takes work, and questioning your beliefs is uncomfortable, which results in a great exercise for your self-discipline. Another risk lies in defaulting to easy entertainment or avoiding difficult topics. While there's nothing wrong in reading easy books to relax, you miss out if you stay away from more demanding and complex works. Reading thought-provoking and/or long titles conditions your brain to eschew mental laziness. When a book provides an intellectual challenge and you keep going, you train yourself to stay with problems for as long as necessary to figure them out instead of giving up, and that's a habit that will surely help you in other endeavors, too. Day 24, on happiness through self-discipline. It is one of the strange ironies of this strange life that those who work the hardest, who subject themselves to the strictest discipline, who give up certain pleasurable things in order to achieve a goal, are the happiest. When you see 20 or 30 people line up for a distance race in some meet, don't pity them, don't feel sorry for them. Better envy them instead. For a person who has never tested their self-discipline over a long period of time, it's hard to believe that giving up pleasure can lead to immense happiness. Most certainly, it doesn't feel that way when you're fighting against the craving for chocolate, compare exercise to torture, or feel sad that you have to set money aside and can't spend it on this new cool gadget. However, in the long haul, based on my personal experience, subjecting yourself to a strict discipline does lead to a happier life, and it can be a powerful motivator in the moments of doubt. Let me explain why. Firstly, as we talked about in day 1, living your life the hard way makes it easier. People who voluntarily expose themselves to challenges are more capable of handling unforeseen hardships. Moreover, giving up certain pleasures, such as unhealthy food and sitting all day in front of the TV, can lead to immense improvements in one's well-being. Maintaining a healthy weight and beneficial nutritional habits doesn't just lead to physical improvements, it also affects self-esteem, reduces the risk for depression, and improves your body image. Giving up on pleasurable things, such as spending money without control, can also help you avoid crushing problems in the future. Today it might be inconvenient that you can't spend your entire salary, but tomorrow your savings can save you from bankruptcy or pay for an urgent medical intervention. Lastly, self-discipline is in itself a manifestation of your higher being, and is connected with nobler strivings. A human being, reduced to its primal form, has little ability for self-control. Operating in scarcity mode and left to its own devices, your primal brain will stuff your body until you won't be able to walk. It will make you cheat on your partner with every passing stranger. It will assume that every step outside the comfort zone is a danger, and so you'll never grow. Exerting self-control is working against the dominance of your primal brain. You forego primal urges in order to reach bigger and more important goals or to cultivate values that are important to you. You can live your life in a way that is congruent with who you are as a deeply complex human being, not a mere animal with the ability to reason. This leads to experiencing a wide variety of experiences that life has to offer. Many of them are immensely more gratifying than merely satisfying the most basic human needs. Day 25, on starting today. Don't wait for tomorrow to do something you can do today. Have you been pondering starting on a new goal but are still procrastinating on it? Come up with the easiest, simplest, and quickest action you can take today to initiate momentum. If you want to stop eating sugar, eliminate all chocolate bars from your house or choose one day a week during which you won't eat sugar in any form. Take it from there, step by step. If you want to start exercising on a regular basis, do 3 push-ups and 3 squats now or any other super quick exercise. Tomorrow, do 1 more repetition. Find a more suitable workout once you establish the basic habit of some exercise, even if it's just a few push-ups a day. If you want to start saving money, take just $1 out of your wallet and put it in a jar. Yes, it won't change anything today, but if you add $1 for the next 3 months, you'll have saved $100 and established a habit of saving. There's no excuse to not take any of those simple actions now and finally break the chain of procrastination. Don't overthink it and don't obsess over the future. Take care of establishing a tiny habit today, and take it from there. Day 26, on the long-term consequences of your choices. Whenever you are presented with a choice, ask yourself which option you would prefer to have taken in 10 years. Self-discipline is largely dependent on your ability to look into the future and imagine yourself not having taken the difficult choice today. If you paint the mental picture with enough detail, you won't be able to bear the thought of letting the situation remain the same or getting worse. A simple exercise of asking yourself which option you would prefer to have taken in 10 years can help you avoid succumbing to temptations. And let's not fool ourselves, it probably won't work every time, but even if it doesn't work every time, at least it will make you pause sometimes. Let's imagine that you're torn between buying a new piece of furniture you don't really need but like a lot, or saving that money for your retirement. In 10 years, would you rather have a crumbling piece of furniture you rarely use or, thanks to the power of compounding, twice the amount you're now pondering on spending? For this technique to work, you need to consider your failure to stick to your resolutions not as a once-off event, but a precedent that can ruin your long-term progress. Otherwise, this technique won't work. For example, if you're on a diet and are tempted to eat this awesome chocolate chip cookie, if you tell yourself that it's simply this one time, obviously in a 10-year timeframe it means nothing. And it's true, one cookie eaten today won't ruin your diet for the next decade. However, it's not about eating this specific cookie. It's about the precedent it sets and a possible pattern of cheating during a diet that might develop from making this decision. In 10 years, would you prefer to have developed a habit of eating cookies while on a diet or established a habit of not eating cookies at all, or only on special occasions? Day 27, on following the wrong path. If something scares you in an excited way, something that gives you energy, that's a good sign. But if something is making you miserable and draining your energy, please stop. Life is telling you that is not the path for you. When you think about pursuing your goals, you might be tempted to think that the process will be long, arduous, and painful. While it's good to assume that it won't be a walk in the park, there's a danger in equating the journey with being miserable. Self-discipline is powerful as long as you apply it to the goals you care about, the ones that, even when they are difficult to accomplish, energize you. If, as Derek Sivers points out, your goal is draining your energy, chances are it's better to stop. For example, I was working on building a company in the software as a service industry. I know nothing about programming, and this business not only required some technical knowledge, but also relied heavily on phone sales, something I hate to the core. My goal to build a successful company was of immense importance to me, but the path I chose was making me so miserable that I hated waking up every morning. I could have pressed on, tapping into the deepest reservoirs of my willpower, but ultimately life was telling me that this path wasn't for me. I made the right decision to cut my losses and sell the business. Day 28, on living in offensive mode. Life is an ongoing process of choosing between safety, out of fear and need for defense, and risk, for the sake of progress and growth. Make the growth choice a dozen times a day. If you're reading this book, you're most likely living in relative abundance, whether you agree with that perception or not. You have access to some kind of an electronic device for reading, which means you have some disposable income, which means you don't live in extreme poverty. You also most likely don't live in a native tribe somewhere in the jungle or in a small village in the war zone, where survival is a daily challenge. Consequently, you don't have to live in defense. The negative consequences of your acts, when compared to people who aren't as lucky as you, are in most cases negligible. You can afford to venture out into the world without the risk that the enemy tribe will kill you. You can risk launching a side business because even if it fails, you'll still have a secure job and perhaps even some savings. You can go on a diet and temporarily restrict caloric intake. I assure you that you won't starve to death. Analyze the decisions you've taken during the past week and ask yourself whether they were motivated by the need for defense and safety or by the prospect of progress and growth. Make sure that the great majority of your decisions favors some smart risk-taking instead of letting the fear stop you dead in your tracks. Week 5. Day 29, on avoiding effort. There is just something wrong with getting up every day and moving through your existence with the least possible effort. If your expectations are always those of someone content to live without physical challenge, then when it comes time for mental, moral, or emotional challenge, you fail to meet it because you are out of practice. I consider physical exercise a fundamental habit for every person who wants to build self-discipline and achieve their goals. Granted, not everyone has the health required for strenuous physical activity, but there's always some kind of effort you can undertake to move your body in a beneficial way. In addition to obvious health benefits, physical activity provides another immense benefit. It's an exercise in exposing yourself to effort and challenge for the sake of bettering yourself. As Mark Ripido states in the quote, "Living your life without physical challenges makes you rusty when it comes to dealing with other types of challenges, including mental, moral, or emotional challenges that sometimes require more strength than a fitness workout does." How often do you avoid effort when it would have been beneficial to face it? If you're content to live an easy, effortless life, are you also content to live your life without ever realizing your full potential as a human being that has evolved to thrive in a challenging environment? Day 30, on looking like a fool. You have to look like a fool while you're looking for answers you don't have. A frequently overlooked aspect of building self-discipline is the fact that if you want to rise above mediocrity, you need to be fine with the fact that you'll undoubtedly make a fool of yourself every now and then. Perhaps you tell all of your friends that you're going to build a business, but the business goes bankrupt and you lose all of your savings. Maybe you set a goal to harness the power of your self-discipline to learn public speaking, even though you're terrified of standing in front of the crowds, and then deliver a less than stellar performance. This is normal, you have to fail your way to the success, but for many people, it's a blow they can't withstand. They might be so harmed by it that they'll do anything to avoid future humiliation, including giving up on their goals. Failure, rejection, and humiliation are anything but pleasant. However, the ability to withstand it and keep going is one of the key differences between successful individuals and those who fail to make their dreams come true. As disagreeable as it can be, accept that occasionally looking like a fool is a part of the process of becoming a successful person. Fortunately, the more often you voluntarily expose yourself to rejection, humiliation, or failure, the easier it will be to handle the feelings they generate.